Hello, friend. Thanks for joining today's session and thanks for stopping by my channel. Today we will be solving one design problem on LeetCode. This problem is called Design Twitter. And let's first go through the problem description. It says like design a simplified version of Twitter where users can post tweets, unfollow or follow another user and is able to see 10 most recent tweets in the user's newsfeed. Implement the Twitter class. So everything we have to do by implementing a single class. So that sort of explains how oversimplified a version of a Twitter it is. The class will have a constructor and it will also have a function called post tweet where it will have the parameters user ID and tweet ID, and that will basically compose a new tweet with ID tweet ID by the user ID, and each call to this function will be made with a unique tweet ID. Okay, and then we'll have a get newsfeed function where given a user ID, it'll return us the newsfeed for that user, which means that 10 most recent tweet IDs in the user's newsfeed. Each item in the newsfeed must be posted by the users who the user followed or by the user himself. So this is, I think, important. Tweets must be ordered from most recent to least recent. Then we have void follow where the user ID, follower ID started following the user with ID followee ID. So we have two IDs. And then we have unfollow where we'll just break the connection. And there is some example given. So let's try to see this example visually. So what we will do, we'll sort of surface our whiteboard here and we'll try to see what are the different options that we are trying to implement here. So we want to implement a Twitter class, and this Twitter class will have the first method will be post tweet, and in post tweet what we are provided with is the user ID and the tweet ID. We are not bothered about the content of the tweet. This is sort of just the ID based mapping that we are sort of want to concern ourselves with. And then we have follow where there will be a follower ID who is following and whom he is or she is following, a followee ID. And similar to that, we have unfollow where you have a follower ID and you also provide a followee ID. Uh, the next function is get newsfeed, which sort of given a user ID, it should give us a newsfeed. And let's see how it actually will surface. So assuming a very simplified interface, for example, there is just 3 users in Twitter at the moment, and the users are basically given the ID as 1, 2, 3. So these are the user IDs. And then this user 1, what he is doing, he is creating a number of tweets. So let's say this is his tweet stream, like the series of tweets that he is posting. So I'll call them as T1, T2, T3, T4, and so on, like these many tweets he is posting. And the second user is also posting some tweets. So he is posting like T5 and T6. The third user is also posting, but not much, just say one tweet, T7. And these tweets are basically, say, there is a timestamp associated with that. So, for example, let's say this user posted this tweet at time interval 1, posted this one at time interval 5, posted this one at time interval 9, posted this one at time interval 15. This we can think of a very simplified interpretation, like maybe he posted that at a Monday morning and posted this one at, say, Monday afternoon sometime. So this could be like just a representation, simplified representation of a time if we just consider the time in a linear scale, like where we are sort of assigning one timestamp. So these are like timestamp that you can think of, right? And let's say this user posted these items on 2 and 4. This user posted this item on 8. Now what happens is, let's say for user 3, I want to create the news feed for user 3. So how would the news feed for user 3 look like? So user 3 had posted a tweet of herself at time interval 8, but if we mix and match these tweets, what it'll look like, first we will have T1, or in the reverse order, like if we go the most recent tweets, let's say at any given time period, let's say we have all this time periods set. The current time is say 16. At this time period, the most recent tweet is say T4. Then we find what's the next most recent tweet. It's T3. Then it's T2. Actually, I missed T7 in between. So it should be T3, then T7, then T2, then T6. So we have done this, done this, done this, done this, done this, T5 and T1. So the tweets order from most recent. So this is most recent to least recent will look something like this, right? The newsfeed. Now the question, and also I'm assuming like this user is basically following both 2 and 1. If he or she is not following 2, he'll only see these tweets. Otherwise, if he's not following 1, he'll only see these tweets. So that's, I think, the other assumption. And he'll also see his own tweet always. Like if he is not following anyone, at least he'll have that one tweet in his newsfeed that he had posted. So how are we going to do that? So the idea here is to create multiple dictionaries. So one dictionary would be, we should call it user tweet map, right? So what this user tweet map will have as our key, it will contain the user ID, and as our value, it will have a list of tweet IDs. And these tweet IDs are basically in that chronological order that they came. So the recent tweets will be at the end of the list. So that's the assumption. So this is one dictionary. Then another dictionary we have is follow map. So this follow map, it'll tell us, given a user, who are the other users that this guy is following. So there will be a list of user ID along with that. So the moment I want to know who this particular user is following, we can get it from the follow map. The other important dictionary is called, we can call it, say, tweet time map or something, where we know the timestamp for each tweet. So it can have like a tweet ID and a timestamp. So once we have these three basic dictionaries, three basic data structures, let's actually cover these and change the color. of this section to a different color, say green. Yeah. So once we have these three different data structures, we can try to approach this particular problem, like sort of implementing these methods. And let's see how can we do that. So let's first think about how can we implement post tweet. So whenever a user is posting a tweet, right? So we have to update two different data structures. So what's happening at post tweet? So this is a generation event, like we are generating a new tweet. So a new tweet ID will be sort of given to us, like new tweet has been generated, and this tweet ID will be updated in two data structures. So user tweet map is the first one, where for a given user we have to update that this user has posted a new tweet, and also on the tweet time map, where what is the timestamp associated with the tweet ID. So that's the first thing that we'll get once we have this post tweet method. Now let's come to the follow method. Once we follow a user. So this is, I think, quite straightforward. Like it'll just update this follow map method, where we update this follow, and unfollow is also the same. We'll update the unfollow map. Critical thing comes when we are trying to implement the get news feed. So get news feed actually uses um, all the data structures in multiple ways. So let's see how it actually how we try to sort of create the news feed out of these data structures. So first of all, what we need to have, let's say if we have those follow map, the user tweet map, and tweet time map properly populated uh, through the other functions, like we can assume something had happened, or if not, that failure scenario also we need to handle there. So we can assume when we are generating this news feed, this particular series of tweets we have seen, right, like for a given user. So this is basically a representation of the user tweet map. Like for a given user we have this list of tweets, and those list of tweets are basically sorted in the order of their arrival. What we will do, we will sort of, for each of them, let's say I'll redraw them here. Sorry, that's a horrible rectangle. Let's say we redraw them here. So these are the three users, and corresponding to each user, there are a stream of tweets which are there. And each tweet has a timestamp associated with it. So let's call it T5, T6. And this is T. This is T7. Each tweet has a timestamp associated with it. Um, Whenever we are trying to find the top uh, feeds, right? Like, so actually the get news feed, we don't want all of them. So we want top 10 elements. So what we will do is, since they are already sorted, this particular problem can be taken as an individual problem. Like if you have n number of sorted arrays and you want to pick um, 10 highest elements, how would you do that? So that is actually the same principle that we are going to follow it here with. So what we will do, we'll sort of start with the end of each element, and we'll compare all of these elements, like whichever is highest in that list. Whichever is highest, for example, in this case, based on timestamp, say this is highest. So what we will do, we'll just take this element off and move the index to the next element. So in the next round, when we are comparing, all of these elements t6 t7 will be still there, but we'll compare it with t3. Then again t3 will be crossed off, and the next time the index will move to t2. So in that way what will happen, will only compare n elements at a time, or n elements at a time, but we will just get uh, the highest element in that iteration, and that iteration has to be performed n number of times, or 10 times in our case. So 10 times we have to do iteration over those n lists. And what are these n lists basically? So n list is the number of users the current guy follow. The current user follows. So this is basically the concept here. So let's actually move on to the code, then we can understand this principle better. So if we look at the code here, what I have done here is I have defined a integer time, and then three data structures for this hash maps. We have a tweet time map, which is an integer to integer map, and then we have a user tweet map, which is an integer to list, and then we have a follow map, which is again an integer to list. While initializing, we are simply doing time is equal to 0. That's it. I mean, that's redundant, but we are sort of doing that there. We can also move this creation of new hash maps to the constructor. So let's actually do that. That will actually look good. So we'll do this and keep tweet time map there. Use a tweet map to here, and follow map. Right, so this is done. Post tweet. What we are doing in post tweet, so we are seeing if in user tweet map, if it doesn't contain the user ID, then we have to create an entry for that. So we have to create a new array list like this. I mean, no, the user has not posted any tweet. This is like the first tweet that the user is posted. So that first time initialization has to be done. So that initialization is being done here. And what we are doing after that, we are just adding this tweet to that list. And we are also adding that tweet to this tweet time map where there is a tweet ID. And then we are putting this plus plus time there. Then we come to the second method, which is the get newsfeed. I think this method will come later. First, the follow method. Follower follows a followee. If the operation is invalid, it should be a no op. So I think the bunch of checks have been put in here to sort of do this if this check is actually valid. So if follower ID is followee ID, so if I'm following myself, I don't need to update anything. Otherwise, I'll end up in a circular kind of scenario. If follow map does not contain follower ID, then we'll just do this. This is the exact same thing. So this is a sort of like initialization. If follow map follower ID does not contain followee ID, then we'll add this. So if it's already added, we'll not add it. If it's not already added, then we'll add it. Let's put it inside this braces so that it looks good. So that's, I think, the follow principle that we have. And then comes at the unfollow part. Under unfollow, we have this the same check. If follower ID is equal to followee ID, then we return. Otherwise, we check that if follow map dot follower ID, there is something like this get should return me something. I mean, ideally it should return the value a list. If the list is there, then I can check if the followee ID is contained in that, then I can remove it. And to remove it, I'm just converting it to an integer explicitly so that this remove is an object removal. So like this is like it says removes the first occurrence of the specified element from this list. So array list has two kind of removes. One is object removal, one is index based removal. So I'm trying to use the object based removal here. And I'm also not using braces here, so I'll try to use them because it just makes the code look good. All right. So I think this is quite simplified. Then coming to get newsfeed. Yeah. So what are you doing in get newsfeed? So we need to return this a list of integer tweets, the 10 most recent tweets if available. Otherwise, whatever is like if empty list, that's empty fine. So first we need to find out like how many users this guy follows. So for that we need to find out from the follow map. If the follow map contains the user ID, then we'll create the new array list of the existing list that is there for this particular user ID. So this will create a copy of all the users that it is following, and then it'll add on top of that the current user ID. So the reason for creating this copy is I want to add the current user ID also to that list, and this is a temporary list. After this function is executed, it'll just be killed off. uh, this is required because I don't want to update unless what happens if I directly get the reference to the actual list that this follow map is pointing. What will happen will update the self user ID to the follower list, and it will just create a like a loop kind of scenario, and that'll be bad. So once we have the list of follows, we create an array. And why do we create this array? We create this array to hold like how many elements are actually there. So what this is actually doing, we are checking in the user tweet map. If the user tweet map contains this follows.get I, like this particular user, this is iterating over all the users that I'm currently following. So this follows get I is the like the current user in this iteration. If it exists, like if that particular user has posted some tweet, then I'll get the number of tweets that that guy or girl has posted, and I'll just deduct one from it. So this basically, it's like a list of index that I'm keeping, and these list of indexes like the number of users I'm following. So that's why this size is that. So number of users I'm following, that's the size of array that I'm keeping, and inside that I'm having for each of the element I'm just keeping the index, right? Then comes the crux of it. So this is like sort of I'm iterating over this loop 10 times, and what I'm doing here, I'm initializing few temporary variables here like temp idx, tweet id, latest time. And then what I'm doing here is I'm doing uh, iterating over these indices that I had saved at this time. Initially it'll all point to the last index of the array, and if any particular user has posted something, it'll point to the last tweet that the user had posted. And if the user has not posted anything, it'll just be -1. So that's the first check. If it is -1, don't bother doing the rest of the stuff. Otherwise, we'll just get actually the tweet ID, like what is the tweet that is posted, and also get the time for the tweet. And using this time, we can basically do a tab, like what is the latest time that we have available. And if we have I'm sorry, latest time available, then we are sort of keeping the tweet ID in our note. So this is like in this particular iteration, what is the latest tweet that we had found? Whatever the latest tweet we have found, if we have not found any latest time, it'll just be the same as we had initialized, so we'll break out of it. Otherwise, if we had found something, so this temp idx will save that. We are decrementing that index. So we have already processed that tweet. So we are decrementing that index for that list and adding it to the result and again iterating it. So the next time again, it will go over. So this is just the a basic implementation of it. Let's try to copy this over to LeetCode and see how it performs. I'll drag this up, Java, Let's run the code here once. So that's it. Let's try to submit it. Yeah, seems like it's working. So that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining in. See you in the next session. Bye bye.